Akira Toriyama, man. I'm not crazy about making reaction content, but for something like this where it's so impactful, I feel like I just needed to get my words out there. And waking up to the news this morning about his passing was kind of like a punch in the gut first thing in the morning, and had to go to work and kind of, didn't really have a lot of time to process it until I got back home about just how crazy this is. His work was immensely impactful in my life in ways that I know about and probably ways that I don't really know about. Growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, anime wasn't the same as it is today, where it's kind of widely accepted and everyone kind of knows it. I think Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z is kind of where anime as a form of itself, anime was really kind of blew up. And I know for me personally, I always liked the action. Even before anime and Dragon Ball, I always liked those kung fu movies with Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan and all those people. And with Dragon Ball Z, I started with Dragon Ball Z actually, and not Dragon Ball. I started with Dragon Ball Z, seeing those characters doing all the fighting and fantastical elements and kamehamehas and all this stuff, along with just the intense storytelling was a form of storytelling that I had just not been exposed to before. And it's what really got me into anime. And I know for sure, it's not even about I knowing, but it is certain that there's so many anime that I've watched since that I come to high regard that was also based on Dragon Ball. And yeah, this is huge news. I'm not gonna say I'm a sad person or someone that's distraught by this, but yeah, it has some significance to me because Dragon Ball was a huge part, and anime as a whole became a huge part of my life and kind of formed who I am today. Watching Dragon Ball Z as a kid, I wanted to have the strength of Goku and the calm and coolness of Piccolo, and I likened myself to young Gohan, who was kind of thrown into a world that seemed unnecessarily cruel and scary. But when we come to these stories and how we connect to stories, it's not too different from say like religions or other kind of churches or other kinds of stories like that, where you have stories that teaches lessons to people and kids. And I grew up in church. I had church upbringing, but I also got lessons from the stories as well. And one of those big things from Dragon Ball and from Goku is to have an open mind and to keep improving yourself, to keep going, to keep improving your strength, and just for the sake of it, not for anybody else, but for the joy of it in itself. And that's something I never really took consciously when I watched it, but it's something I've come to appreciate as I got a little bit older. And a lot of times, for everyone, your experiences are what shape you, and the things that are around you shape you. And I have a lot of loved ones that have given me strength. I have a lot of environments that have given me strength, but I'm making this video because Toriyama and Dragon Ball, in its own way, that story has given me strength as well. And I'm sure I would not be the person I am today without that story and the influence from that story. Going back to what I was saying before about anime, the fighting and all that stuff, the action, that being that exposure to that kind of stuff is what kind of got me into fighting games as well, because the next step up from the kung fu movies into the martial arts, and then to the martial arts with powers, was playing games. I was always into gaming as well, but playing fighting games was the next step for that. Instead of just watching these characters do these things, you have the control yourself. You pick your character and you're able to do these crazy martial arts moves and do that kind of stuff. And learning to improve in those fighting games is somewhat reflective to those stories that we come to appreciate in shonen manga that's been synonymous with Goku's story in Dragon Ball as well. So without that, there'd be no Tekken the way it is for me. I don't know. I can't imagine a life without that. And I'm sure it's the same for a lot of people. Like, you haven't played Tekken long enough if you haven't seen a Goku Lars online. So, I know it hits a lot of people, especially in the fighting game community. And I'm not going to say this as some kind of source or head figure of the fighting game community, but it's something I've observed, that there's just a large crossover in the fan bases of anime, action anime, and fighting games. And it's probably for the similar reasons that what I just said. Just having seen that action, having that catharsis of being able to improve on your craft, and being able to express and test your mettle and strength and knowledge against another person in combat. I'll say in a safer environment and in a less investment environment than practicing real martial arts. And I'm sure there's tons of people that went on to practice real martial arts because of that story as well. So yeah, the man left behind a huge legacy, and I was just completely shocked to hear this news. He died at the age of 68, what they report as a subdural hematoma, which I understand is probably like a brain clot, or a brain blood clot rather, or kind of like an aneurysm sort of deal. And 68, that's a life. That's not what I would consider the full life, but 68, that's when I think about, and I'm gonna get a little bit into this existentialism here, so if that's not something you're comfortable with, then just a fair warning. But when I think of things like this that happen, I feel like his life was cut short by this thing that kind of just happens. And when you live long enough, you see that these kinds of things just happen. You have no control over it, and things like this that your body just kind of works in a way that sometimes it's at some point it's good, and then sometimes it just stops. Or sometimes something just happens. I've seen it for myself. I've experienced it myself. I was diagnosed with the disease in myself for, at 25, that luckily is non-lethal, but it's something that's turned my life around, and I've had to be, learn to be thankful that it was not lethal. But, there's something that to be said about life and the fragility of life and the human body, that, anything can happen. Toriyama was someone that was able to follow their dreams. He was able to write the manga that he wanted to do. And when you think about just how unpredictable life can be and how it can go, I can't advise anything besides being able to go for what you want to do. Anything can happen. And, when it comes down to it, you don't want to live or come at the end of your life with regrets, considering all the things that you could have done while you had the ability to do it. If there's something that you want to do and you have the means to do it, I'd say put your energy into it and try to make sure that you do things in the way that you want to live. Life's too short to not really follow your dreams and do what you want to do. And I understand that not everyone's in a position to do that. Circumstances, monetary, familial, otherwise, and it's a privilege to be able to do those kinds of things. So I say that fully with respect. But if there's a way that you can put yourself into a situation that you can really free yourself and do the things you want to do and become the person that you want to become, that you put your energy to that so that you could live a life that you want to live. I think Toriyama lived the way he wanted to live, and I'm sure that when he first started, he didn't think he was going to become one of the most influential mangaka in the entire world. He just wanted to write manga at first, and you never know the kinds of things that happen in life. So yeah, I don't know how to close this, but yeah, thank you, Akira Toriyama.